AI happens pretty fast. If you don't stop and look around once in a while, it might just pass you by.
Hello and welcome to The Reasoning Show. I'm your host, Brian Gracely. And once again this month, we are going to dig into the thing that the entire world waits for, analysis of AI Cloud News of the Month. We're going to dive into, what feels like maybe the most news we have had in such a long time. Brandon's going to join me right after the break, and we're going to dive into all things AI and Cloud News of the Month. Today's show is sponsored by Nasuni. There's a growing gap in AI right now between what's possible in theory and what successfully works at scale inside an enterprise. The difference comes down to unstructured file data. Many AI initiatives struggle because the file data they depend on is scattered, unstructured, and disconnected from where and how work actually happens. Nasuni changes that. It brings your unstructured file data into a single, secure foundation so AI, both generative and agentic, can access it with the context, governance, and performance it needs in production. Bring AI to where your unstructured data lives. See what it takes to activate your data for AI and request a demo at nasuni.com/AI. Today's show is sponsored by ShareGate. You're out of time. Copilot needs to be deployed ASAP, but your tenant really isn't ready for it. Years of data, permissions, and users lurk in its shadows, ready to be exposed by AI. ShareGate Protect sees it all, so you can find the exposure risks, fix them fast, and deploy AI with confidence. Microsoft 365 Governance, they've got this. Learn more at sharegate.com/protect. And we're back with another AI News of the Month, or AI and Cloud News of the Month, because we got some cloud news this month. Brandon Whichard from Software Defined Talk, great to have you back, man. Our monthly thing, which is always sort of the biggest show of the month. How you been, man? How you been?
I've been fantastic. I think I say this every time I'm on the show. I feel like there was more news this month than there has been in the entire year. I was looking at our rundown here. I was like, we could have a 7-hour show, and I look forward to figuring out which one of the many things. I was thinking to myself, we have a trial, we have earnings, we have. I mean, it's almost like a soap opera. We have everything you could possibly want. We've got nuts and bolts, speeds and feeds. We have emotion. It's like we're like a Netflix series waiting to happen right here. You tell me what plot line you want to go down, and I'll bring you a story. Yeah,
it's amazing. And even with all that, we don't even have the normal stuff that would be drama. We're not even dealing with people's mistresses. We're not even dealing with murderers. We're not dealing with even just the normal stuff.
That's right. We don't even need true crime. We've got just real business happening. So that's how great it is.
That's right. So yeah, there is, we always sort of say at the end of the month, what would you give this month in terms of a letter grade? I mean, this one, I think just in terms of volume, it's an A+.
It has to be.
It also feels like a month in which, we've had several months in the past where we go, well, this company is way up. It's going to be their period of time for a little while. And then this company is down. I feel like this was a month where there was some very distinct up and downs, but more than just one or two. So I think we're going to dive into a whole bunch of those. This is going to sound weird. Let's start with the cloud stuff, because for every once in a while, I don't know why it's not every quarter, but every once in a while, all of the cloud earnings come out at the same time. Clouds are making a lot of money again. It seems like basically people haven't been able to build their own data centers fast enough. They are spending a lot of money in clouds. Amazon up 28% this quarter, Azure up 40%, GCP up 60%. As Cote likes to say, all the clouds are making money.
Yeah, I was even going further. It's this sort of and one, I think we need to come up with a name. It's the cloud, it's almost like an eclipse. When all four or three companies report literally the same day, at the same time, it's why are they doing this to us? But nonetheless, it maybe in some ways it works against them because they all do it. And they all basically say they've never been doing better and it's been great. And I think that really is the takeaway. It's not so much that any one of these companies did something that was incredibly great. It's the fact that they're all doing well. I'm just going to use the metaphor. Everybody's eating, it's or whatever you want to say, rising tide raises all ships, pick your cliche, right? Kind of thing. Or God forbid we say early innings. And it's just it just kind of validates that no, people are spending real money on this. Every single one of these vendors has tremendous demand. They're all selling and doing great and making tons of money. And at least for the moment, right? revenue's going up. And I just think that's like, it's one of these things where like we can talk about great management, but it's really just like you're in the right place at the right time. And even our good friends Intel, who we kind of left for dead, or at least I left for dead a few years ago or a few months ago. Like, what's back? The CPU's back. Everyone's like, turns out this Claude harness and all these harnesses, they're actually not GPU bound, they're CPU bound. And Intel just sitting there like, Pat Gelsinger must just be like, if they had just kept me in there for a few more months or years, I would be the one winning. Because I'm just thinking Intel's done nothing. They were left for dead because people were like, they need to become a foundry. No one needs the CPU anymore. And then they've just been sitting there the whole time. And it turns out people do need the CPU. We're back. They did nothing. They just literally have been doing the same thing the entire time. So don't tell me about great management. Sometimes it's just enough to be in the right place at the right time. The cloud vendors, Intel, that's what's going on here.
Yeah. Pat Gelsinger went from being in the Stop Talking Hall of Fame. He's now into the Sam Bankman-Fried Hall of Fame of, if I had just stayed in place, I would be making so much more money.
I was a genius. You took me out too soon. I love that.
But it's the other thing that's incredible to me, and I feel like I'm trying to think of another scenario in any sort of recent tech history. Usually what you have is lots of companies when something starts, lots of people out there. At some point, the herd gets culled. You have some acquisitions, some people go bankrupt, and then you end up having sort of one company who's the distinct leader. You have a second company who's like kind of out there fighting with them, but they're maybe half of their market share, and then there's typically not a third that's really other than like, for contract reasons, we have to buy a couple. I mean, we've got three companies right now that are, Amazon. I mean, I guess it sort of works out. Amazon's $150 billion run rate. Azure is, they say 138, even if we called it, 115 or something. And now you've got GCP up to $80 billion run rate. I don't remember the last time we ever had a market in which sort of three companies that, essentially do the same thing were all growing at insane rates once the market has become really mature. And obviously a lot of the stuff is AI driven, but that feels very different too.
I think that, and also like, this is literally the world's most expensive poker game of all time, right? Yeah. It's like in order to play, like the entry fee is like $50 billion. And it's just like, and I think all three of these companies, and we'll throw Facebook in there because they're like sort of cloud, but not, they're doing their own thing. But the same idea, I think they all see that like, this is the market we've all got to be in. And we've got to build the compute out, and we've got to do it right now. And it just does not matter how much money it costs. And there really are only 4 or 5 companies in the world that can even attempt this, and they're kind of all doing it. So there's no person in the garage who's like, what I'm going to do? I'm going to train a model, and I'm going to go out there and compete with these companies. It's like, it's impossible. So, well, that's what's happening.
Yeah. I mean, that's mostly true. Although this past month, the shoe company Allbirds did pivot from becoming a shoe company with $50 million of funding to become an AI cloud provider. So your thesis is not actually completely correct.
That's right. They went up. I think they went up 400%, and literally the next day dropped. I don't know. Maybe as of this time of this recording, maybe they've gone up again. I don't know.
Actually, breaking news. I'm just getting news. Both Coca-Cola and Saudi Aramco have moved out of their core businesses, now moving into AI chip providing. So it's possible. It's entirely possible. Let's dive into the AI part of the news. I'm looking at this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. I've got 12 articles about OpenAI this month. And I don't even think that's covering, I don't have the ones about them being in court with Elon Musk. So let me read through these real quick just to, this is a month. This is literally a month, and we're recording on the 30th. We haven't even completed the whole month. Head of product leaves, buys a podcast. CEO and CFO can't agree on IPO timing. CEO, huge piece in the New Yorker. CEO may be out of control. Can he be trusted? CEO has a Molotov cocktail thrown at his house. They put out a policy called a white paper, Industrial Policy for the Intelligence Age, in which they just make random bullshit statements like, yeah, AI could change a lot of stuff. I get including democracy, I guess those policymakers should just figure it out.
I'm pretty sure that paper was written by AI because it didn't really say anything. There's a lot to read there. Go on.
They leaked an internal memo about how concerned they are about Anthropic's competition. They bought a personal finance company. They did release some new stuff in Codex. They sort of are severing, not completely, but partially, their agreement with Microsoft, but they replaced that with an agreement with AWS. I mean, insane for 1 month.
And also, it's reportedly they're going to build a phone. That was also reported as well. You didn't have that one on there. All right, let's take them. Let's kind of group them a little bit.
Yeah.
So first, I want to be on here for both of us. I want to take some getting right points. I'm 99% sure on one of the previous episodes we said something like, it looks like the strategy is going to change at OpenAI. It's going to become enterprise focused. And I think we said something like, but they hired a lot of consumer-based product executives, and they were going to build this advertising thing. And I think we tipped off the audience. We're like, probably could watch for some management changes. And I think 100% we saw that.
Yep.
There were some flat out people just going to spend time with their families. Always respect that. Some people, again, not throwing any shade, moving on for some medical. They needed some time to deal with some medical things. Yep. We wish everyone well, right? And then of course we see a lot of new leaders coming up, and of course there's like the friction between the CFO. That's the one to watch now, between the CFO and Sam, about like what's going to happen there. So I think we called that. I'm not saying that was like the hardest prediction in the world to make, but I think when we get one right, we should at least call it out. So clearly they have quote unquote made the pivot, right, to focusing on the enterprise, which of course makes sense, and of course driven almost exclusively by the fact that Anthropic, who was like the little brother that they kicked out with all of the other people that didn't get along, who's now basically going to overtake them in revenue if they haven't already. So that's super fun to watch. So I think that's sort of like the internal, if you will, palace intrigue. Now, the other thing I think we should give credit for, though, is I do like their new Codex tool. Okay, it's pretty cool. Like, I'm a devoted cloud code, can't even speak anymore, user, and it's been great. But Codex has done some cool stuff around like actually driving your computer. And if everyone hasn't had a chance to like download it and play around with that. So I think that's a place where they like, I'm going to call that like legitimate innovation, a place where they're a little bit ahead of Claude. So I think that we have to give them some kudos on the technical front. And then, final thing I would say on OpenAI is sort of like, somehow they've broken free of the Microsoft relationship that seemed destined to like be breaking up for years. And now they've got this massive new deal with AWS. So, so I think that was probably a big win for them. The fact that they quote unquote, got free of that. And that seems like it paves the way for the IPO. And now, of course, though, for next month, I'm sure we'll be talking about it. The last hurdle they have to get over is to get through this trial where Elon Musk is accusing them of like not converting from a nonprofit to a for-profit. So it's like inside of this, you have a lot of fun stuff, right? We got the palace intrigue. We got a little fun tech with Codex. We got some business, deals solidified, but now we still have the legal thing hanging over them. So, and that was really, as you said, that was just in the month of April. Like that should be a whole year for most companies, but that was 1 month that all happened, Dad.
I know. I think if I were to throw this into the ChatGPT and say, hey, summarize this for me, summarize where OpenAI is, again, in the year that they are telling the world I'm going to go IPO, it would be like, well, we haven't completely finalized our strategy. We're still sort of stuck between the massive installed base we have with ChatGPT that we can't completely monetize. And oh, by the way, there were some numbers leaked that maybe they haven't met all those revenue numbers. So strategy still up in the air. Management team still going through some changes. Massive legal thing hanging over our head. Our number one distribution partner, we're no longer partners with, but we've got a new distribution partner that we're hoping is going to be the same. And oh, by the way, we haven't talked about the product that has literally almost 1 billion users in multiple months. But oh, by the way, we'd like to go IPO, and we'd like you guys to trust that we know where we're going with this stuff.
Yep. No, that's good. That's a
good stuff.
Great summary. And of course, there was I believe it was the New Yorker came out with a long profile or takedown piece of Sam Altman, depending on how you want to think of it. So that whole thing sums out as like, we're not sure we can trust Sam. He seems to not always tell the truth in front of people. And it's like, this has now been reported pretty much every year since we've been like following this. So it's always fun. And it's just like, well, probably when they go IPO, there's going to be like, Sam isn't maybe on the level. There's going to be some of that conversation. But, and of course, I mean, that I guess the biggest story of the year would be if for some reason that actually takes him out, but it seems unlikely. Right. But that will be fun for us to watch.
Yeah. The other thing that we sort of glossed over, they spent literally, it looks like somewhere between $30 and $100 million to buy a podcast. I'll throw this out there. We're available. You're available. Yep. I'm available. If any of these companies, Cursor, you want to buy a podcast, or Anthropic, any of you guys who want to buy an AI podcast, open to discussions. So show@reasoning.show. Give us
just send the checks, send the wire through. We'll get the legal stuff worked out later.
Yeah. All right. Well, if we're going to talk about OpenAI, we have to talk about Anthropic. It's sort of the 1-2 punch of every month. Anthropic, it felt like, had a very Anthropic month, which was they did some things right. People praised them a lot, and they were like, no. I can't take too much praise. I need to scare the shit out of the market. So they released Opus 4.7, which again heard mixed reviews. Everybody and their brother is throwing money at them. So, whether it's they announced they're doing $30 billion in revenue, where the last time they talked about doing $9 billion in revenue. You've got them looking to raise $50 billion at a $900 billion valuation. Google wants to invest $40 billion. Amazon wants to invest $25 billion. They don't seem to sort of lack people wanting to throw money at them. And at the same time, they're starting to experience, at least it feels like, some shortage of computing. So they're doing some stuff to, people are saying that. And, oh, by the way, they released a model that, whether it's believable or not, is so potentially disruptive from a security perspective that they're like, I'm going to tell you it exists, but I'm only going to give a few people access to it. And it's going to be sort of random as to who has access to it. Most likely the companies that are their current suppliers. But
they're friends. They're friends in the investment community.
Yeah, they're friends in the investment community. They're current technical suppliers, so they don't get hacked. Kind of a typical Anthropic roller coaster ride in terms of, lots of highs, some crazy, like, what are you doing kind of stuff. Luckily, I didn't see Dario talk about any sort of Holocaust level, wipeout this month, but maybe they'll wait for next month. But crazy stuff again from Anthropic. And by the way, like you said, we even talking offline, everybody and their brother loves cloud. Like every engineering team, everybody seems to love this product right now. And so from a product perspective, kind of a good story to go into IPO season sometime, maybe at the end of the year.
Yeah. I mean, I think we're just learning, this is just another example, added on to the millions of others where like product market fit just fixes everything. And it's like, they figured it out, maybe by accident, maybe by genius strategy. It doesn't really matter how they got there. They have solved the coding problem in a way no other tool has. I said, I like Codex. I like some of the stuff they've done in UI, but I don't even think anyone's debating it anymore. And I think the thing I always talk about and kind of joke about is like people know, so when the United States government's like, no one can use Claude Code. It's banned. You know who was using it? The people at the NSA. They're like, we got work to do and we can't mess. Like, we don't have time for your nonsense. This is NSA, right?
Right.
Reports are out of like Google. Of course, Google has its own coding assistant. Reports are the Deep Mind team has said they're only using Claude Code. And if they're not allowed to use it, they're leaving. And, again, I guess that's somewhat disputed, but, it just kind of shows it's like, no, like, people know, like when a tool is so powerful and it's so useful, right? It's like, going back to like iPhones. It's like, remember, like we worked at places like you can't bring your iPhone to work. It's like, yeah, I don't care what you say. I'm bringing my iPhone to work. And it's like, eventually the iPhone was like the preferred thing. And it's like, they have it, they figured it out. And that's why all the other things you mentioned, it's like, that's why Google, like they have the demand. Everyone wants to be their friend. Everyone wants to, and now who knows? As we have seen so many times, the reversals in this industry are so vast. I'm almost like, I would say it like this. It's like, I'm a huge fan of Claude and I use it every single day. I reserve the right to change my mind at any moment for any reason, because I know how things change, but they figured that out. And then, I don't know. I'm really more of the opinion that they just have this very strong belief that security and like doing it and just, if you will, existential worry is why they keep doing these things like, whoa, you can't use Mythos. It's too powerful. I actually believe that's what they think, but a lot of other people believe this is like a cynical marketing strategy. They just keep announcing the thing. It's like, this is so powerful, you can't touch it, which of course, like, I mean, it goes back to childhood. It's like, this is so good, the children can't have it. Of course the children want it, right? Whatever you're talking about. Right. So I don't know. Like, I guess you have to decide for yourself. I believe they ultimately believe it is too dangerous, but it also happens to be the world's greatest marketing strategy. So It's like, I don't, is this a group of super geniuses running the smartest strategy ever? Or are they literally just falling ass backwards into like maybe one of the fastest growing companies of all time? I leave it to the listener to decide.
Yeah. Yeah. I was thinking about this as I was reading through stuff and you were talking and we were reading through the last. Remember in the early days of cloud, even like 5 or 6 years in the cloud, when somebody would make a press release and they would be like, we're going to commit $1 billion to this project.
Yeah, doesn't even matter. Doesn't even register anymore, right?
I mean, yeah, I would literally like this month, they're like, yeah, people threw $100 billion at us. And I'm sure a lot of that is like cloud credits and GPU credits and this, that, and the other. But I mean, the other thing that sort of jumps out at me is we're just even looking at like 2 companies who happen to be consuming crap loads of compute. The other thing that was really interesting to me is, I mean, somewhere in here, you've got Google throwing TPUs at them. You've got Amazon, obviously,
training them at
them. You've got Jensen going on podcasts saying, no. The most important stuff they've done has been trained on, Blackwell or Vera Rubin or whatever. The whole thing of like, everything has to be tied to CUDA doesn't seem to be playing itself out. Now, I don't know how much. It would be fascinating to know how much engineering work has to happen to be able to go across all these different GPUs and how much, low-level code has to be written. But it does feel like a very mixed type of thing as to how this is happening.
Well, it kind of even says, the NVIDIA thing is even funnier. Like we've said this a lot on this podcast. Like, I've always said Jensen's like, he's a passenger on this whole thing. Like when he started this company 20 years ago, he was talking about gaming and now he's in the middle of AI.
Right.
And what has he been saying for like the last 5 years? He's been saying something like accelerated computing is the future. It's all the future. Everything's going to be the GPU. And what does NVIDIA come out with? A new CPU. And why is they need a new CPU? Because it turns out there's all this, like what you're kind of referring to. All this orchestration needs to happen to like feed the GPUs. And actually, it turns out that's actually a lot of work. That's why we were kind of joking at the beginning. Like everybody needs Intel. NVIDIA, who was like left the CPU for dead like 17 different times, they're making their own CPU, right? Yeah. Amazon's or AWS is back talking about Graviton, how great that thing is. ARM's out there like, what? We're not just selling you the plans anymore. We're going to sell our own chip as well. And it's like, here we are. It's like, just a few years ago, CPU's dead. Now everyone's building CPUs and even NVIDIA is doing CPUs. So it just kind of goes back to like, no one really knows anything. Like maybe next month it'll flip back and be like, actually, it's the GPU that's even faster.
Well, but it just keeps changing. And we didn't even mention AMD. I mean, their stock price is up 260% over the last year and 70% this year. And then, it's like, I don't even remember them announcing anything. And people are still like, yeah, got to buy some chips.
That's right.
So, well, on the flip side of the chips and everybody buying chips, it feels like data centers are having a little bit of struggle. So whether it's, a lot of news around data centers this month, everything from the government of Iran is threatening to attack and is actually attacking data centers in the Middle East. Yep. So they are big, giant targets and people know they're valuable. You've got states in the United States, I think Maine, maybe some others. I think Ohio is looking at banning the building of new data centers. There was a report that came out that said 50% of data centers planned in 2026 will either be canceled or delayed, either because they can't get data sources or they can't get land or they're taking up too much water. It does feel like a little bit of, okay, cool. You guys are buying all these chips and you're doing stuff. Where are you going to put them? And that math feels like it's going to be coming due fairly soon.
Yeah, well, I think that kind of brings us probably to the place that we should spend some time talking about. It's like, there's a great article that I kind of refer to as sort of like a critic of the skeptics. So this was an article that kind of took a look at Ed Zifron's like writings, and he's obviously known as the biggest AI skeptic. And I really looked at his skepticism through a real critical way of thinking about it. And I'll just make the summary real short. Is sort of like many things that Zifron has kind of said, for the most part, have been proven false. Like no one's going to use it. People are obviously using it, right? The models aren't going to get better. The models are great. Claude Code is like redefined coding. So there's a real nice takedown of a lot of those arguments. But what I think it really reveals to your kind of point here is like, but what are the open questions that are still left, right? And I think that's one of them. It's like, is to the point of like, we know we want to keep building on these models, but we're going to need essentially more computing and more power. So the question is just like, can the world, I mean, the United States being one country and obviously in the entire world, can we literally find a way to do that? That's question one. And the answer may be no. It just maybe is like, I like to think of it as, going back to like, when we kind of got into this, Brian, it's like, we knew in 1999, we wanted faster internet connections. right? But only whatever 15 or 20 years will go by to the point now we all have fiber. But that was a long, but we knew every moment we would like to have a faster connection, but it took that long to build it all out. Right. And that's your question about data centers. Maybe that's what we're seeing here. Is like, I don't know. Like, we know we need more compute and we know we want to build bigger models. It just may take us a long time to get there because it just takes that long to build infrastructure, or you need some other kind of like technology to break through, something that doesn't require as much power. And I think that's a way to kind of like, if you will, not be so much down on AI, but just to be more like the physical realities are kind of like meeting the vision. And it just could take us a long time to get there.
Well, yeah. And I think it points out another thing that, so let's just say these numbers sort of run their course. Like they play out the way that people are sort of predicting, which is like, hey, we're going to have some shortages of data centers, and hence, I mean, you're going to get into a very interesting scenario. And, we're already starting to see sort of inklings of it where people go, gosh, it feels like my access to, Anthropic is slowing down. They did this thing where they
throttled.
They throttled some stuff. I mean, I think we're going to start seeing, kind of like, I don't know, the analogy I can think of is like when everybody you knew, and people won't get this if they're not old enough, they were like, well, everything we do is sort of like dial up access to the internet. And then you started having a friend who had like a T1 or, oh, I've got ISDN. I don't even have to think about dialing in, and it's fast up and down. I mean, I think there's going to be a very interesting, like, what are you now willing to pay? Like, what multiple are you now willing to pay just to keep the lights on as far as, for example, so you're not like, oh, every day at 10 in the morning, I'm already out of tokens because they got throttled. I think that's going to become a very interesting behavior. And then also the behavior of like, Mike, I was rocking and rolling with this stuff, and then my company kind of cut back because they either cut back or they got cut back because the price increase was so much higher to stay at that level. Like, what does that start doing to people's behavior? Like, are people like, I'm only working
what are the
noon?
incentives, right? And what are the costs? And I think, Microsoft is like, I mean, worrisome for all of us, quote unquote, regular people, just like me living off my Claude Code $20 a month subscription, which is a fantastic deal. But, Copilot's come out and said they're getting rid of quote unquote unlimited plans. Everything's going to go to like, we basically have to pay per token. It's like, whoa, hold on. That's like, I almost want to be like, hey guys, let's not do that. Right. But I get it, right? There at some point, the demand is so high, and to your point, and maybe a better, maybe a little bit more recent analogy, maybe not better, would just be like, think about cell phone plans. Like there was a time where like you had to pay for text messages, right? That was capacity constrained.
Right.
Data, you had to be like, whoa, wait a minute, I can't download that file now. I got to wait till I'm on the Wi-Fi, right? Remember that whole conversation? Right. And like eventually it all gets built out, but it took, there's these weird periods of where you're just like, there's just way too much demand, and you got to pay, either you have to pay a lot for it to use it, or you got to wait till it gets to like, it's just like we all think of it now, like, oh, we have unlimited data. We don't really have unlimited data. What we have is like 50 gigs a month, and that turns out to be more than enough for most of us, right? That's what we want for the tokens. We don't want unlimited tokens. I just want like, I don't know. I don't even know. You see, that's even more crazy. I don't even know how many tokens I'm really using. Maybe it's 1 million a month. Maybe it's 10 million. I don't even know. I just want enough so I can do the stuff that I want. And this is where these companies are kind of pulling us back. So again, that may slow down this AI stuff a little bit. It's like, it may, to your point about not enough power means we can't do unlimited token pricing, which means we got to like rein people in, which means we may be in a point where we're like kind of all frustrated. Like if I could just have unlimited Claude Code, I could build the world's greatest widget and I'd be rich, but I don't have it. Right. So we'll see how that plays out. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think there's going to be, I don't want to say sort of like a reckoning. I don't want to make some sort of like, oh, there's going to be a winter coming, but yeah, it does feel like there's going to be a really interesting transition that people are going to have that's going to be, right now it feels like all you can eat. Nobody has any idea what a token is or how many millions of tokens. And it's going to be there's going to be some sort of like rationalization activity that happens where you're like, all right, I'm going to, I got to do a little bit of this at this time of day, or don't do too much of this, or don't be sloppy and just ask it stupid questions. And then what happened with, you mentioned like cell phone pricing and all that sort of stuff. And I think Benedict Evans wrote an interesting paper about that this week. And what happened there was basically, you had this very expensive technology, it was called TDM technology. So it was like legacy telephony technology was in the background. That's why it was so expensive to make a long distance phone call or to send a bunch of text messages. And then they just said, well, what if we just put the internet in between there? And all of a sudden the pricing, the question will become like, what will be that moment in which people are like, oh, here's how we, basically, put the internet, which is this, kind of feels like unlimited thing in front of AI or between you and AI. And whether that's, people figure out some incredibly better, more efficient way to train these things, or they just go, I don't even need to train these things. I can do it entirely with harnesses, and harness engineering is 10 times cheaper or something, or whether it's like people have built incredible, like, sort of routing engines that are like, oh, that's a bunch of dumb stuff. I can route these over to these really, low cost models. You have no idea in the background. Something like that's going to have to happen because, we're going to run into a thing very quickly. Or
it's just simple things that are boring. People don't like to talk about. It's like, what happens over time? Computers get faster. And it's like,
they do.
Today's GPUs 10 years from now will be like, can you believe a Blackwell was like X amount? And it's just that consistent annual. And that's like, you think about the mobile phones today. Well, that all started in like the 1980s, like the first PC. Right. And it's like, they get so good that you're like, it turns out I can put this on a tiny computer. And I'm sure the GPUs. So again, like this may be the whole thing. It's really more a time frame question. But for Anthropic and for OpenAI, like if you're playing this game where you're like at a poker table and like you got to bring $50 billion, now the problem is like, you don't have endless money. At some point, you got to start making money, or do you just get literally? It's back to your thing. It's like it's not that I was wrong. I was early, but guess what? You win for being early. You lose like everybody else, and it's just like they may have to ultimately spend themselves to go bankrupt. And then, someone comes along and is like, who can wait the longest? And clearly Google, Microsoft, and Amazon have the cash machines to be like, we can play for a long time, right? Facebook been there as well. And if this takes 10 years, fine, we can go. Whereas Anthropic was like, we got to get public. We got to get more money. We have to have some more chips to play at this game. And that's why it is kind of funny when we kind of say, it's like, oh, look, they did another deal. And it's like, yeah, you did another deal, but like you kind of did a deal with everybody. And it's almost in some ways, another way to look at this is OpenAI and Anthropic are really the proxies for the really behemoth companies fighting, right? They're sort of like, and it's sort of like who can, if you will, have enough power inside those companies to kind of like keep them on their side until either they go bankrupt or there's a clear winner. So it'll be fun to watch.
Yeah, I do still in the back of my mind, I was thinking about this. I was out walking the dog or something, and I was like, I know everybody talks about like Anthropic is, potentially going to IPO for around $1 trillion and OpenAI. And I'm like, God, those are gigantic numbers. But I'm like, maybe one of the big companies finally swoops in and goes, whether it's an NVIDIA or a Google or Amazon, the companies that are sitting there at $3, $4, $5 trillion thing, and they go, I am making the big bet. It is obvious to me, and I think Anthropic's probably the most obvious company in this at this time to be like, let's not let them get to IPO. Let's get them before it goes out. I still think there's a possibility that happens. I think some of these guys look at it and they go, their advantage right now is so far ahead. People don't just totally get it yet. But boy, if we could wrap our go-to-market around it and our other, capabilities around it, I still think that's a possibility. Maybe more so for Anthropic than OpenAI.
Well, it's a really interesting question. I would say like we probably talked about on the show, we were something like when this company started, like they're like worth $50 billion. That's crazy. And they don't have any revenue. And we all were like, who would pay $50 billion? Who even has the money to do it? That's crazy. And now you think to yourself, that's nothing. Like that was to spend $50 billion to potentially add 1 trillion to your market cap, it was like the best investment of all time. So, here we are again. It's like, the one we don't have to go into today, but, Cursor, which was my former love, right, that I gave up on, is that, it's been announced. They're going to be acquired probably for $60 billion by SpaceX. Right. And I think that's a company that's like in danger of like becoming irrelevant. Right. I mean, because I think they don't have their own model. And, the stuff they were good at is kind of the boring way of doing it. Right. No one's really coding this stuff anymore. And so it just kind of shows you just how crazy all of this is. But like, if you're Elon Musk and, he's about to have $1 trillion IPO, at least people report that, he probably says to himself, like, why not? Like we take their distribution. I hook them up to this like giant data center I built somewhere in Tennessee. And maybe that's $1 trillion. And if you say it that way, if you're like, he's paying $60 billion on a bet to make $1 trillion, you're like, all right, those are huge numbers, but the math kind of does work out. So, and of course, if you're the Cursor people, you're just like, we're geniuses. We're so smart. We're so smart. We didn't listen to Brandon and sell out for like 10 million or 10 billion rather.
Right.
So good for them. Good job not listening to me. So that works for you.
Yeah. I still think the math around that one is real questionable.
We'll see how it goes.
So 2 last things. One, another kudos for you. Block, the company behind Square and some other stuff, is now making their employees bring, live working coding examples or, basically
demos, right? Sure.
Minimum viable instead of decks. So you called that. That's going to become, I think.
That's the new norm, I think, at this point, right? Yeah. Everyone's doing that.
And the last one that I sort of looked at, and I put this in the same category as like Allbirds, AI coding company Cognition to raise $25 billion valuation. Is the market not yet saturated with really, really big ones? People are sort of figuring out who's going to give them money at a $25 billion value. Like what VC is like, God, I've missed out on everything, but I could give money to this other company that isn't Copilot, isn't Claude, isn't Gemini, what are you thinking?
I don't know. I wish I had something creative to say here. I don't know. That's a good question. I guess maybe the simplest thing is like, hey, if you called Anthropic and they're not going to let you invest, and you called OpenAI and they're not going to let you invest, and you have a bunch of, what do they call it? Not general partners, but whatever,
limited partners,
the trust funds and the what else I'm trying to think, the college endowments, they're calling you like, we need to get some exposure to AI. It was like, you got to, what's left is what's left. And so you're like, let's take a flyer on Cognition. And who knows? I mean, like I said before, it's like I already wrote off Cursor, but like maybe there's something there. And someone, as you said on this podcast, we gloss over a fact that a podcast, I think you underreported it. I heard it was upwards of $200 million the TBPN people got. And it's like, that's the most ludicrous thing on this list, right? And it's like, but it's like it's not even a rounding error. It's less than a rounding error. So it's like, Who cares? So Cognition, good luck. Good luck to all of you. I hope it works out for all of you.
Yeah. And we never want to downplay people getting good money, bad money, stupid money, whatever. If it's got a B on it, good for you. You've done something.
Go for it.
Whether it's the greatest PowerPoint presentation or actually good code, who knows? Well, why don't we wrap up with that? It always feels like it's good to wrap up an AI news of the month with something that we can't explain, because a lot of this stuff we can't explain. So, all right, man. Well, with that, we're going to wrap it up. Folks, thanks for listening as always. Hopefully we gave you something useful as far as analysis for the month. We'll be back again next month to try and figure out what craziness has gone on in this industry in the last 30 days. So with that, we'll wrap it up. We'll talk to you next month.
Check us out online at reasoning.show for all things reasoning. And leave a 5-star review wherever you listen to the show.